Good morning and welcome to this special edition of ABC News Breakfast, coming to you live from the lawns of Parliament House. I'm Michael Rowland. This is our top story. Rudd rises again, but can he avert a catastrophic defeat?
I simply do not have it in my nature to stand idly by and to allow an Abbott government to come to power in this country by default.
Out of the lodge and out of a job, Australia's first female Prime Minister quits politics.
The pressure finally got too great for many of my colleagues. I respect that, and I respect the decision that they have made.
The cost of change, 6 ministers quit the cabinet.
She is one of the toughest warriors that have ever led the Australian Labor Party. So indeed it's been a privilege to serve with her.
The opposition calls on Kevin Rudd to end the uncertainty over an election date.
Mr Rudd must now say when he intends to have the election. The Australian people are yearning to make a choice.
Well, 3 years and 3 days since he was spectacularly dumped as Prime Minister, Kevin Rudd this morning is back in the top job. Kevin 07 has been replaced by Kevin 57, the number of votes he won in that caucus ballot last night to snatch the Prime Ministership back from Julia Gillard. Julia Gillard last night made a very quick trip to Government House to formally tender her resignation to the Governor-General Quinton Bryce. Kevin Rudd, in just a few hours, is going to be making the same journey to assure Quinton Bryce that he does have the numbers on the floor of Parliament to serve as Australia's Prime Minister. Yet again, Virginia, we have been long talking on the program about how anything possible is possible in this 43rd Parliament, and the events of yesterday and last night didn't fail to please on that front.
Not at all. Michael, good morning. Good to see you there in Canberra. I'll be anchoring things here in the studio this morning. Kevin
Rudd is going to be sworn in as Prime Minister yet again after an extraordinary day and even more extraordinary night here at Parliament House. And watching it all, reporting on it all, was our political correspondent Melissa Clark. Mel, good morning.
Good morning.
It was quite a sequence of events.
It was an extraordinary sequence of events, and it was quite a confusing sequence of events yesterday because this spill unfolded in a way that was very different from past spills have unfolded, and I think that reflects the fact that the Rudd camp was much more organised this time than what we saw in previous efforts. Last time they hadn't even secured Rudd to actually challenge. They had people freelancing is the term that we would use, people trying to trigger things without necessarily working in a coordinated way. That wasn't the case this time. This time, when the Rudd camp was saying they believed they had the numbers, they weren't over-egging it as they have in the past, and hence it was a successful spill last night.
So the big question is, does Kevin Rudd have the numbers to serve as Prime Minister on the floor of Parliament?
Well, it certainly looks like he will, because he has secured, even before the spill actually took place, there were a number of key crossbenchers who came out to give their support. So we heard from Andrew Wilkie, the independent member for Denison, say that he would be prepared to back a Rudd government, he having worked closely with Kevin Rudd. Bob Katter, the independent member for Kennedy, well, not independent anymore, he's the Katter's Australia Party. Now, he has had a close and long-running relationship with Kevin Rudd, so there was never any doubt that Bob Katter would be supporting Kevin Rudd were he to return to the Prime Ministership. So those ones are in the bag. The Greens made it clear that whilst they weren't happy with the idea of a leadership change in Labor, that there's no way that they were going to support Rudd, because we certainly saw some of that drop away from Kevin Rudd himself. But he is hoping his own level of personal popularity, which he has demonstrated, will help change that. I think it's interesting that he's making an appeal to have better relations in business, because one of the criticisms that was made of Kevin Rudd before he was deposed was the way in which he had mining companies in trying to set up the resources super profits tax, that it had been just imposed on businesses, that he wasn't consulting with businesses. So both leaders, both former Prime Ministers and one now Prime Minister, have criticised each other for the way they have handled business relationships. So I think that is clearly a broader issue for the Labor Party that they're going to have to address regardless of who is Prime Minister.
Now, the other key event last night was the mass resignations of all of those ministers. There was a lot of political hurry-curry, I suppose, going on last night, starting with the Deputy Prime Minister, the now former Deputy Prime Minister, Wayne Swan.
And it had to happen because at the last attempted spill, and even in the lead up to this one, a number of senior Gillard backers in Cabinet had made it clear they would not serve under a Rudd Prime Ministership. They had no choice but to follow through on that, and many have made it clear personally they wouldn't want to be in a Rudd Cabinet again. So we saw Wayne Swan step down as Deputy Prime Minister and from his portfolio as Treasurer, but say he's going to still continue to contest his seat in Lilly, and he certainly had a relatively upbeat press conference given the circumstances. But then we had a slew of other resignations. So we had Stephen Conroy, who will remain a senator but has given up his position as Leader of the Government in the Senate and as Communications Minister. Who else did we have? We had Peter Garrett. He is not only giving up his portfolio as School Education Minister, he's not going to recontest his seat of Kingsford Smith in New South Wales. He was likely to lose it anyway, according to the polls, but he's not going to be contesting that, so Labor will now have to find a candidate for that seat. We've also got Joe Ludwig. He's a senator. He's going to stay in the Senate, but he's giving up his agriculture portfolio. Craig Emerson is giving up his enormous portfolio responsibilities, and he's also stepping away from politics, which
surprised me because he is the ultimate political warrior.
He lives and breathes politics, perhaps more than just about any other here at Parliament House, and that's telling you something. So for him to give up his political career is certainly going to be a loss of a character here at Parliament House. And there is one more resignation that is also one of the really interesting ones, which is Greg Combay, of course, stepping down from his climate change portfolio. He is someone who had been caught in the middle of a propaganda war between the Gillard camp and the Rudd camp, and certainly the Rudd camp had been pushing for him to either change or pushing him to publicly look at shifting. He insisted all the times, regardless of what was written about him, that he was remaining behind Gillard, and we have seen that to the end, that he is stepping down. He'll recontest, but stepping down from Cabinet, not seeking to remain in Cabinet in any way, shows he did stay with the Gillard camp all the way through.
Just before we take it back to Virginia, let's hear now from one of the ministers staying in the Labor cabinet, that is the Foreign Minister Bob Carr. He spoke last night. Let's hear what he had to say.
I think suddenly the next election has become very contestable. I think for those Labor Party people concerned that our achievements in disabilities, in schools, in health, in environment were at risk from an Abbott government, there is now hope. The chances of blocking an Abbott Prime Ministership, which repels and frightens and disturbs and concerns a lot of Australians, is enhanced by what the Labor caucus did today.
So Bob Carr there.
Thanks, Virginia. Cloud from the northwest is spreading across central Australia and into Queensland, and we have a low-pressure trough that's moving further away from the New South Wales coast. This will ease the winds and rain, and in South Australia, a cold front and trough are causing coastal showers. For Queensland, cloudy with isolated showers over the southeast and southern interior, light showers about the peninsula, and high cloud, but it will be mostly dry for the rest of the state. In New South Wales, still a flood warning for the Hawkesbury and Nepean rivers, and frosty about the southern ranges. Rain along most of the coast has eased to showers, but it is becoming more widespread for inland areas. For Victoria, frost warning for the northeast. Isolated showers also around the northeast, and they will develop over in the southwest as well. Morning fog across Tasmania, showers in the north, and that nearing front will cause showers from this afternoon in the west and central areas. South Australia, frost warning for the Riverland. Showers along the coast may reach Adelaide. There won't be much, possibly half a millimetre, 17 degrees. Western Australia, showers to the south of Perth and about the Goldfields, extending into the Eucla. And up in the north, we still have a flood warning for the De Grey River. The areas of rain will be about the Kimberley into the northern interior and then spilling over the border. A fine day in the Northern Territory. Tomorrow, showers in Brisbane, Sydney, Adelaide and Canberra with a top of 15 degrees.
Now from the former Prime Minister Julia Gillard, who was quite dignified in her concession speech.
The pressure finally got too great for many of my colleagues. I respect that, and I respect the decision that they have made. But I do say to my caucus colleagues, don't lack the guts, don't lack the fortitude, don't lack the resilience to go out there with our Labor agenda and to win this election. I know that it can be done.
There's just been too much negativity all round. There's been an erosion of trust. Negative, destructive personal politics has done much to bring dishonour to our Parliament, but done nothing to address the urgent challenges facing our nation. The challenges are great, but if we're positive and if we come together as a nation, we can overcome each and every one of them.
Pleased to see you here, Kevin.
Popular, prominent
and pesky. Australia's ultimate retail politician still draws the crowds even as a backbencher. In 2006, he too knifed a Labor leader.
The caucus, as you know, decided to change leadership to Kevin Rudd.
Today, the Australian Labor Party elected a new leadership team.
A year later, Kevin 07 swept to power in a Rudd slide.
Today, Australia has looked to the future.
From the first days, his prime ministership set a cracking pace after declaring,
"Climate change is the great moral challenge of our generation."
Kevin Rudd quickly ratified the Kyoto Protocol and became the most popular Labor leader in news poll history with a long-anticipated apology to the stolen generations.
For the breaking up of families and communities, we say sorry.
The prime ministerial jet worked overtime as the man dubbed Kevin 24/7 clocked up dozens of international trips, meeting the rich, powerful and famous.
Kevin Rudd has not been to Ireland.
There were embarrassments and setbacks too, as Grocery Watch and Fuel Watch failed. But the global financial crisis in 2008 presented the government with its biggest challenge.
We are in the economic equivalent of a rolling national security crisis.
A crisis which resulted in an emergency $42 billion stimulus package. It delivered home insulation and school halls, projects which later generated trouble for the government.
To act for our children, for our grandchildren.
A trip to Copenhagen before Christmas 2009 brought very bad tidings. World leaders failed to clinch a climate deal. The Prime Minister's popularity was falling.
Now, it might be easy for you to sit and 7:30 report land and say that was easy to do. Let me tell you, mate, it wasn't.
In early 2010, the government was panicking on emissions trading. It was fighting a cashed-up mining industry over the super profits tax. Then, without warning, in June 2010, Mr Rudd became the first Labor Prime Minister denied the chance to contest re-election.
What I'm less proud of is the fact that I have now blubbered.
The campaign that followed saw Labor reduced to minority government, and Kevin Rudd handed the consolation prize of Foreign Minister, a high-profile position which kept him in the headlines and allowed a platform to launch an unsuccessful tilt for his old job.
They regard me as the best prospect to lead the Australian Labor Party successfully to the next elections.
A year later, supporters bungled another attempt at a comeback. A would-be challenge wasn't to be.
But I'm not prepared to dishonour my word, which I gave solemnly.
But faced with the prospect of an electoral wipeout for Labor, true believers keep clinging to the hope that Kevin Rudd might save them and that a 3-year wrong could be righted. Andrew Green, ABC News.
Julia Gillard made history the day she became Australia's first female Prime Minister.
I will well and truly serve in the office of Prime Minister.
Confident, Ms Gillard?
Her rise came after a turbulent night and a tap on the shoulder. She soon called an election to seek public endorsement.
We should have Bob Hawkins going.
It never came. The election returned a hung parliament.
There he is.
Recognised as a skilled negotiator, Julia Gillard outflanked Tony Abbott to form a minority government.
Labor is prepared to deliver stable, effective and secure government for the next 3 years.
But forming that government took compromises, and a famous back down from this.
There will be no carbon tax under the government I lead.
The government took a tumble in the polls, and the coalition's campaign for the next election was already framed.
She said it, and she will be judged by it, Mr Speaker.
The Australian people could not trust the Prime Minister on this. They can't trust her on anything.
Kevin Rudd's presence was always felt.
Hi guys, how's everybody?
He'd overshadowed the 2010 election.
The 2010 election was sabotage. We went into that election in very difficult circumstances.
And by February 2012, an always fragile relationship broke into a full-on brawl.
Gentlemen, the elevator, you can't hold the elevator.
From a hotel room in Washington, the foreign minister resigned.
All the best, folks. Bye.
Flew home to Brisbane and prepared for a challenge. He lost.
I can assure you that this political drama is over and now you are back at centre stage where you should properly be.
But Gillard's dramas were only just beginning. Sleaze scandals plagued her prime ministership, from Craig Thompson to Peter Slipper. And a reluctance to dump either of them brought her judgment into question.
Every day the Prime Minister stands in this Parliament to defend this Speaker will be another day of shame for this Parliament.
I will not be lectured about sexism and misogyny by this man. I will not.
Julia Gillard entered 2013 still behind in the polls. The promised budget surplus would not be achieved. The mining tax was raising almost nothing. She sought to take control.
I announce that I will advise the Governor-General to dissolve the House of Representatives and to issue writs on Monday the 12th of August for an election for the House and half the Senate to be held on Saturday the 14th of September.
But within days, trouble returned. A former Labor member was arrested, a cabinet reshuffle was needed. In Parliament, Labor tried to regulate the media, and the media retaliated.
Bollocks. This is Soviet-style argument.
Her prime ministership may have been a rough ride, but Julia Gillard's life journey's been remarkable.
We know where this ends.
The daughter of Welsh migrants, a shy girl at Unley High in Adelaide, a young industrial lawyer, and finally, after her fourth attempt for pre-selection, a federal MP.
I will do everything in my power to make you proud.